Hello, my name is Ernesto Balderas, Interim Executive Director for Utah Cultural Alliance. For the week of January 22nd through 26th, or the second week of the general session, there were many items addressed in the cultural industry with a surprise bill in the middle of the week. So let's get started. On Tuesday, January 23rd, the Business, Economic Development, and Labor Appropriations Subcommittee heard from the Department of Cultural and Community Engagement about their asks for appropriation. This included the restoration of $2 million in Utah Division of Arts and Museums grant funding to bring the total amount of grant funding back to $6 million, and a variety of state historic preservation office grants and other programs. I'll be sending out a member letter shortly about the presentation and a one sheet that they had prepared and used in their presentation. The Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity also presented on the Rural Economic Opportunity Grants and the Rural Film Economic Incentive Program. The legislative fiscal analyst during the presentation recommended cutting the $1.42 million cash rebate portion of the program, to which GOEO said would lose about $8 to $9 million in direct spend to Utah businesses and 800 to 1,000 jobs per year. That obviously is a pretty huge impact, so we'll keep monitoring this as we move forward. The Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee also heard about the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program, and there was large discussions around statute changes regarding it. They're looking to change the statute so that awards provided by the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program would be through a uniform block grant based off of the average amount of fine arts educator salaries throughout the entire state, instead of the 80% and 20% match that has historically been. The goal and the reasoning behind this is to put the burden back on local education agencies for involvement within the BTS Out program, and to make sure that the state is not necessarily on the hook for increasing educator salary costs. Obviously, this would present a bit of a problem for our BTS Out program, as some local education agencies, if this uniform block grant were instituted, would instead owe upwards of 23 to 25% in terms of a share for their fine arts educators. So it would lead to increased costs for each local education agency, which might impact the amount of fine arts educators that are hired, and thus lowering the amount of fine arts educators we have providing arts education to students in schools. So we are continuing to work with Lisa Clough of Arts Work for Kids to make sure that we can keep apprised of this issue and see if we can't negotiate specific changes to this, and we'll keep you apprised of that. In the House Economic Development and Workforce Services Committee, HB 78 was also heard regarding the rural film economic incentives, and most were fine with the bill and some were okay, but Representative Strong and Chu were no votes on it. And essentially this bill removes the sunset for the Rural Film Economic Incentive Program and just allows for the House Economic Development and Workforce Services Committee to come and review the program every 2 years instead of having a sunset for the program. So there are many voices that are in favor of this, and we look forward to seeing where it goes into the House. HB 115, a cleanup bill for the Department of Cultural and Community Engagement, was also approved very well and unanimously, so we're excited to see that go forward as well. In the House Education Committee, HB 29, Sensitive Materials Review Amendments, this was also heard, and like other contentious bills within the legislature that have either been passed already or are being heard right now, there are many things regarding this bill that made it feel like this bill was already decided upon, but I'll break it down for you. So this bill addresses what the sponsor and several committee members on the House Education Committee characterize as, quote, criminal pornography within schools. Essentially, this bill allows a parent, educator, administrator, or student residing within an LEA to conduct or trigger a sensitive material review for any instructional material as defined in Section 7610.1227. If the review finds the subject matter is a sensitive material, then it would be removed from that LEA and would not be allowed to be accessed again. This would heavily impact school libraries, as Section 7610.1227 does address that instructional materials includes books as well. So in working with the Utah Library Association, we would like to see three things. All book challenges receive a three-pronged taken as a whole or holistic assessment to studying whether a instructional material is actually a sensitive material. And that 76101227 only applies to public displays per the language of the code, not to books or instructional materials. And remove subsection 7, which compels LEAs to remove materials if 3 other LEAs or 2 LEAs and 5 charter schools deem a material be a sensitive material. Again, it seemed like in the House Education Committee that this was very apparent to pass, but we are working with Utah Library Association and our lobbyists to try and see if we can get a meeting on the Senate side to continue to address this bill and see if there's opportunity for negotiation there. So we will keep you apprised of any updates within that. On Wednesday, January 24th, we heard about SB 144, Public Art Funding Amendments. You may have seen this bill appear online, and we did immediately jump on it as soon as we heard it. Essentially, this bill is coming from an outside, high-profile donor that would like to set aside funding for a specific amount of time for public art projects within Salt Lake County, and that is really the impetus for this bill. Utah Division of Arts and Museums in the bill's current state is not in favor of it because it would remove funding specifically allocated for their percent for public art program, which would allow for the purchase and or installation of public art within state-owned buildings. And it would take 20% of those funds and put it into a new fund just for Salt Lake County. So we worked with Vicki Borns of Utah Division of Arts and Museums to see if there was opportunity to lessen the harmful effects of this bill and to negotiate certain things. We're waiting to hear back from the bill sponsor and source of this bill on whether or not any of those changes can be implemented or anything down the road. My apologies if it seems like I'm being cryptic in the description of this bill, but out of respect for the bill sponsor and the people who are responsible for this bill, I am not currently naming names at this time, but we will keep you apprised of any and all developments on this bill. If you have any direct questions, you can always call me at 714-876-7125. On Thursday, January 25th, the Professional Outreach Programs in Schools, or more commonly known as POPs, presented their case in the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee and was able to ask for an increase of $500,000 in funding to their standing budget of $6.175 million. The POPs program reported that they increased the total number of program participants from 12 to 15 organizations, and the committee could not stop giving glowing recommendations and further praise to the program because of how much they enjoyed it. So we're very excited to see where this appropriation goes. And then lastly, on Friday, January 26th, one small thing at 3 p.m. on that Friday, Senate Joint Resolution number 9, Joint Resolution honoring Utah's Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander cultures and communities, was heard and is sponsored by Representative Kwan. This resolution passed unanimously out of committee and could not have been favored more by the committee members. So we look forward to seeing where that goes onto the Senate floor. For week 2 of the general session, that is all the updates that I have for you. And as always, if you have any questions on the general session updates, or if there's anything that you would like to know further, you can always call me at 714-876-7125 or contact me at Ernesto@utculture.org, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Until then, bye-bye.